Only.
Okay, we're now reconvening our March 21st Board of Ed meeting after having held a brief executive session to discuss contract negotiations. As we do at the beginning, I want to start with reviewing and approving the agenda. Has everybody had a chance to look at tonight's agenda? Any questions, comments? I would like to get a motion to change the agenda for today to move our solar energy folks up to the beginning of the meeting, if we could, because I know we have a number of folks here, and I think they'd probably prefer not to stick around through most of it. Could I have a motion to move that right after the comments from the public?
It's still an action item, or after?
It's still on as an action item, but we want to hear their report. We can.
Okay.
Do we want to act on it? What do you think, Gary?
Well, I think you can determine that not to act on it should be so desired.
So it's still as a discuss and approval. We'll leave it at that and decide whether or not we want to approve. So we'll move it up. We need 2/3 vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. So with that, I'd like to welcome, as we do at the beginning and end of every meeting, comments from the public. We cherish these opportunities to get feedback from folks. Everything that we hear, we do take into consideration, and everything that we get on our emails, we take into consideration as well. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, I'd like to welcome Mr. Post and his team of solar experts up to discuss the solar project at the high school.
As they're coming up tonight, we're pleased to have in the audience someone who's not new to the board, Bruce Hampson, chairman of our Energy Commission in town, and someone who has a little bit of experience in the world of energy.
I didn't write all the names down, so I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves around the table, if you don't mind.
I'll start. I'm Andy Marola with the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities.
And I'm Bruce Hampson with the Energy Commission.
Jean McGillicuddy, Bay State Consultant.
Ellie Schechter, Project Manager with Solar City.
Brent S.K., Project Development Manager at Solar City.
So we've given you a couple of documents in the past week or so, and I'm going to go through the process we've gone through up till now, and then allow the board members to ask questions of the panel here, and we'll answer them as best we can and let you discuss and determine the merits of the project. So we began this process back in September 2012 when the Board of Selectmen directed the Wilton Energy Commission to look into the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities Energy Solar Photovoltaic Program. With the Energy Commission's endorsement, Bay State Consultants was brought in to guide us through the process. Bay State has served the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen as an energy consultant for a number of years. The process they brought us through consisted of identifying rooftops in town that met specifications, which included at least 15,000 square feet of roof area, adequate sunlight, and at least 10 years remaining on roof warranty. We had to sign a participation agreement, which just allowed them to go forward in the process, the vetting process. We provided detailed utility bill information. They had site visits by qualified and interested companies. Bay State evaluated final proposals submitted by 11 bidders, and then there were negotiations and a final recommendation of Solar City to do our project and Comstock. So the recommended contract called for Solar City to install solar arrays on the Fieldhouse and Comstock Community Center at their expense. The system being proposed for the Fieldhouse has an estimated output of 228,000 kilowatt hours per year, or about 11% of the high school's annual load. The system would be ballasted, so there will be no roof penetrations, which is similar to the system we currently have on the main part of the high school roof. The contract called for us to purchase the power from Solar City for 20 years at a fixed rate. After reviewing the proposed contract, we expressed concerns about the remaining life of the roof, which is about 15 years under the warranty, versus the length of the agreement. In response to our concerns, Solar City agreed to reduce the term of the agreement to 15 years at a fixed rate and provide us with a terminal value schedule, which would allow us to buy out of the agreement in later years rather than paying for removal and reinstallation of the solar arrays. And that's very important to us because if anything happened with the roof where we had to do a complete re-roof and remove the solar arrays and put them back, it would be at our expense if it was during the lifetime of the agreement. So if the roof failed and had to be done in the last year of the agreement, this terminal value schedule would allow us to pay $30,000 roughly to call the deal off. They have to come and remove everything, and it's over, as opposed to maybe $150,000 or $160,000 to remove and reinstall. So the boards of Selectmen and Finance have both discussed this project, and the Board of Selectmen is scheduled to vote on the proposal at their next meeting, April 1st. If it's approved by the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen, the projects are still dependent on several factors. It'll rely on a favorable report on the structural integrity of the Fieldhouse and Comstock roofs, a favorable result for Solar City in the April ZREC auction, and a favorable review of the contract language by Ken Bernard. And I believe they're getting close to that now. He's going back and forth with Solar City a few times. So that kind of sums up where we are right now. So if you ladies and gentlemen have specific questions about the project or the process, we'll be glad to answer them.
Could you explain a little bit more about the auction? I'm just not that familiar.
I can start off and then I'll hand it to Andy.
Sure.
ZRECs, a REC, or REC is a renewable energy credit.
Right.
Okay, ZRECs are for zero emissions, LRECs are for lower emissions. CL&P has a certain percentage that it needs to source from renewable energy. It's from zero energy or low emission. And one of the ways that it can meet its obligations would be, one, to do solar projects on its own, and the other one would be to buy ZRECs from other people's solar projects. So, for example, for your solar project, and it would do that in an auction, and the auction for larger size or mid-size projects like the high school would be in April, and I think we'll find out the results in June, if that's correct. And there'll be a smaller auction, which would probably be the community center. So, and then Andy, I know, has more.
I can add that the reason why there's an auction here is because Connecticut has learned from the experiences in nearby states, and it set up a process whereby the buyer of the renewable energy credits would be the utility companies, the two electric utility companies. That provided assurance to companies like Solar City that doing business in Connecticut meant that there was going to be a very qualified, credit-worthy buyer on the opposite end of these renewable energy credits. And it also set up a process where the solar companies would compete with one another for the lowest price. It's similar to a reverse auction process. When the legislation passed last year, the state set a limit of $350 as the highest. The results from the first ZREC solicitation last April came in at somewhere in between $145 and $150. So that shows you what the market can do. And that process will go on for a total of 6 years. The Public Utility Regulatory Authority will monitor the process to make sure that the program is being successful. But all told, there will be, over 20-year contracts, about $1.2 billion that will be spent doing this. Every year there's a certain amount of dollars devoted towards large, medium, and then small projects. And as long as those prices seem to be reflect what the market is, it will continue for the 6 years. Each of those 6 years will set up 15-year contracts for the purchase of these renewable energy credits. And the utility companies will purchase the environmental attribute of this electricity that's produced through solar photovoltaic from Solar City for 15 years. It's important because this project would not happen but for that ZREC award and that ZREC contract. In other words, some of the value of this project to a solar development company is from your purchase of electricity. Most of the value of the project comes from their sale of the renewable energy credit to the utility company.
And what happens if legislation comes around and these renewable energy credits evaporate?
Once the contract is signed by the utility company, it's obligated to fulfill its contract. So the contracts that were signed last year, they're done. If the Public Utility Regulatory Authority decides that the program isn't working, they can end the program. That does not terminate any of the contracts that have been signed.
And then who sets the discounted electricity price that we'll be paying? And how do we ensure that there isn't a new technology at a lower rate 10 years from now?
Two good questions. The electric price isn't set, it's negotiated, and we've been negotiating that price for about a month and a half now through that process that Ken had described, going from 94 solar companies down to basically have 2 companies that have been recommended to the cities and towns that are in the program. And I apologize, the second question was?
How do we know that that's
a new technology?
Going to be a fair price over the 15-year lifespan?
I can't describe precisely what the price is in open session, but suffice it to say it's the lowest price that I've certainly ever heard of, and I think it's been confirmed by our friends at Solar City. So I think the price is good, but that's a separate question from the what-ifs on what happens a year from now if cold fusion becomes a reality. And I think the answer is you can make any decision based on the best information you have in hand, or you can make a decision out of fear that something better is going to come along. Right now, the fastest growing sector of the energy market is solar photovoltaics. It's been burgeoning. It's certainly burgeoning in Connecticut. It's true that something better might come along that might approach this level of pricing, but if history is any kind of indicator, we're at an all-time low, basically, for the utility companies, say, for the past 10 years since deregulation kicked in. And that's taken us down to about a little less than 8 cents per kWh. Again, I can't say publicly because of this bid situation, but you're going to be paying significantly less than what the current market rate is. And since there's no escalation on that price for the high school project over the course of that contract, you're basically locking in an extremely low price for the duration of the contract. I think it's unusual to have that price. It's probably more unusual to say it'll never go up for 2 decades.
And another mitigating factor is that we have sized the arrays so that at the high school it's only 11% of your energy usage, and I believe it's 64% at the community center.
And even if something does become available in 5 or 10 years, in the meantime, we've been saving $16,000 to $20,000 per year in electric cost.
So about $150,000 over the 15 years?
The entire savings are estimated, projected savings, at between $350,000 and $460,000 over the full term of the contract.
That was both projects, correct?
Yes.
The high school was, I think the high school was $240,000 to $300,000 roughly.
It's ironic that we're having this meeting tonight because the New York Times reported today that China's largest manufacturer of solar cells is going Chapter 11. It might be nice to know that those won't be the panels we're putting on the roof of our school if we move forward. Do you have any comment on that?
We were actually just discussing this outside. You know, Solar City, we are not a module manufacturer. And so our position as an integrator allows us to be agnostic with the other companies that are in the marketplace. There are a wide variety of module manufacturers and other manufacturers of inverters and racking systems that we do business with. And so over the last 6 years Solar City has existed, different companies that have gone bankrupt, it really hasn't affected us because we have such a broad variety of companies that we can work with. At the same time, we have a products division within our company that's constantly evaluating the other products on the marketplace and evaluating the financial viability of the companies that are out there on the marketplace and evaluating who we want to do business with and who we don't want to do business with. And so because of all those factors, Solar Cities really remain unaffected by some of those types of occurrences that happen in the marketplace.
So who has the responsibility to maintain these units once they're on our roof?
Solar City does. So it's our
And-
system. We operate and maintain it.
And these components are fully interchangeable, so you don't care?
For the most part, when it comes to the solar modules, a lot of them are really interchangeable. For us, the system that we're going to end up ultimately, hopefully, designing and installing on this high school, at the time that we're ready to do the engineering, we're looking at what the system requirements are, looking at what the engineering requirements are, looking at the other companies that we're doing business with, and we'll make the selection of which module manufacturer we're going to work with. And I know from experience that whenever we make those decisions, I know there's probably 4 or 5 other companies that we probably could have made, an equivalent decision to work with, but different factors dictated that this is the module that you're going to get on this particular project.
Okay.
And if something happens to your company and you were to go bankrupt, what happens then?
You want me to take this?
Sure, man. You're on a roll.
Keep
I don't like
going.
the answer. I'll give it to Jim.
This system is ultimately going to be financed by one of our financial partners. Solar City has our own financing team where we have tranches of funding with different financial institutions. And so ultimately they're the ones that, because they're financing the system, they have a vested interest in making sure that this system is operating over the entire course of the agreement and the lifespan of the system. So if in theory 5 years from now Solar City's out of business, whichever other financial institution happens to have financed the system and owns the system, they have the ability to bring in their own integrator that can then go ahead and operate and maintain the system so that it wouldn't affect you guys as the end user.
So what you're saying is we're ultimately going into partnership on this deal with your banker. So it might be interesting to us to know who that might be.
I guess depending upon which fund we put it in, we could certainly discuss that information. It is set up in a separate LLC from Solar City and co-owned by us, but in the event if we were to go bankrupt, then the second investor would take over in that case. But they are certainly all very reputable organizations. But I'm sure it's something we could discuss at the time. It goes into the fund. We have 3 or 4 different funds of $150 million plus where we put residential, mid-commercial, large commercial schools, multiple types of projects. And most of the investors don't want any one type of project, so we'll put in a variety. So there could be some local homes, schools, variety of types of projects in there. But it is in a separate LLC.
And the investor has a true vested interest in keeping the system operating. Otherwise, they're not getting any payments from us.
If we hadn't just had the financial housing bubble debacle, I probably wouldn't be as concerned about that. But this has been such a growth industry. It's cause for concern.
Sure. What would happen to what would be the cost either on a daily basis or a monthly basis should it not work and we then are liable for the cost of, to pay, I guess, the utility because you're not able to get paid by us?
Well, if it's going to save us, you're talking about if we had to buy power off the grid instead of here, it would be an extra...
well, let's say the group collapses. What happens then?
Let's say we have a hurricane.
Yeah.
Force majeure insurance.
We have insurance.
As I remember, there is some, reading through that to the extent it is not operable, we're then obligated to pay...
For their lost revenue.
For their
Correct.
lost revenue.
Correct.
What is that?
Well, part of what was in the statement is concerning easements, the fact that these guys will need access to the system up on the roof to make sure it's continuing working.
I don't think that's...
okay.
That's not it. No, it's...
Their lost revenue is approximately $3,000 per month is what they estimate.
So, okay, $3,000 per month.
Right.
But if we're not producing power, you're not paying for power.
It's a take-or-pay contract. In other words, you pay for the production and nothing more. That's why we size things to make sure that you're going to be able to use all of the electricity that is generated on site. But in terms of damages, the way to look at the damages is similar to the way that your current electric supply agreement works. It's the difference between what the contract says you pay and what you'd have to pay to replace that power. And that's right now very much in your favor in terms of what the market is versus what's in this contract.
If I understand it correctly, then based on Gil's question, we'd be liable for $3,000 a month if the units aren't producing power due to some action of ours.
Due to some action of yours other than an event that would basically exclude everyone from performance under the contract, right.
Say there's
Right,
36
if
inches
it-
of snow, who cleans off the snow? And say we don't clean off the snow because
That's
our
not, yeah, it's
custodians
not your
can't get to work.
responsibility to do that. It's our responsibility to keep the system running. We make money by selling the power. It's in our best interest to keep it running. But when we factor in our production for a year, we factor in a certain amount of snow, a certain amount of cloudy days, a certain amount of rainy days.
But isn't it true that you only come if it's over a certain height?
We typically rarely ever shovel snow off. Typically, it melts off. Now, in the event we get a 100-year, 4-foot snow, we'd probably have to cross that bridge, but very rarely are we up shoveling snow. I mean, for example, he just finished the Glastonbury High School project in this giant snowstorm, and what was that?
Yeah, no, I would clarify, we won't be on the roof shoveling snow. Like Brent said, it's a 100-year storm that we would cross that bridge. But the first step that we would take once the agreement is in place with Wilton and once the agreement's in place for the Z-Rex would be to have our structural engineer analyze the roof, assess the capacity of the roof joist to take the existing snow loads that are required by the building code as well as the additional loads imposed by our system, and to make sure that with a large safety factor, they're comfortable enough that they would stamp those calculations and submit them to the building departments, that we would know that a typical or even an excessive snowstorm isn't any cause for concern.
If we're to agree to this tonight, and that was to happen, and in fact they saw that the roof didn't have the structural integrity to support it, are we obligated to any cost?
No.
Deals off.
No, deals off.
And just to get back to your question about snow, basically what the contract will say is that if you declare a snow emergency, you notify them and they have a certain amount of time to respond. If they don't, you're allowed to self-help. In other words, you are allowed to go up on your roof and remove snow, and then it's their cost because they haven't responded in a timely fashion. It's very unusual because these panels are warm even on a snowy day. They're warm so the snow comes off. It's more, from what we've heard from other people, it's more shoveling between as opposed to snow on.
In the last snow we had, did we have the custodians up on the roof shoveling at all?
I don't think so.
Well, I know Comstock always has somebody up on the roof shoveling.
It may depend on the roof, capabilities as well. Some of the older roofs may not have the same ability to hold, that X amount of weight. I know in Maryland about 4 years ago we've got a similar storm to you all, but it was a foot more. And it was the beginning of the solar there, and every building had to be covered, and everyone was concerned. And we ended up having engineers come out and do what they call a compaction study, because what happens is not the initial 3 feet. It's when it sits up there and it starts to shrink, and then it snows again on top. Right. And they were measuring 30 and 40 and 50 pounds a square foot, extra added weight. Lo and behold, a few ice rinks collapsed, but there was some shoveling that went on at that point. That was a 100-year storm. So I mean, we're talking about a storm that could happen. And based on our performance, it's in our best interest to keep safety in mind and take care of the building, take care of the array. So we would hope if there were a snow emergency, we'd be up there taking care of it. I mean,
Sure.
You had talked, maybe I missed this, you had talked the other night at the Board of Selectmen about 7 or 8 municipalities in Connecticut where you have installed projects, so they're up and running.
So we have a wide array of municipalities in Connecticut where we've installed residential systems. Commercial systems, the number is less, but yeah, we do have some municipalities where we've done commercial systems.
So you have schools, and is Glastonbury up and running?
I was just going to say, we just completed Glastonbury High School at the end of last year, and that system's been up and running since
Is that the only school that you have at this point?
The only school in Connecticut.
You have schools in New York?
we've done over 300 schools nationwide on the East Coast, probably about 16 at this point total.
Yeah. In New York right now, I can think of 9 schools. There's several other in Maryland that I don't know the count on, and then a few projects in Massachusetts.
Westchester County? Any Westchester County?
Not in Westchester County. Farther upstate, we've done a lot of school projects, closer actually to Binghamton and Syracuse.
No, that's some of us who went to college in the 4-foot snow is a flurry.
Last year when we had the town discussion on the fiber optic project, I guess my question's for Bruce. A lot of residents turned out to have a lot of expertise on that subject who we didn't hear from prior to, that the Board of Selectmen never solicited opinions from the town. Did we go out to the public on this? Like, is the public aware? You have our resident experts.
Well, the answer to that is yes. A rather extensive article appeared in the Bulletin, I would say, several months ago. I am suspicious how many people really read the Bulletin, but yes, we did go out to the public on that.
Right. Yeah.
And we also, with Sandy Denny's, called East Hartford, who was successful in the last auction with about 500 kW of solar. And that's been installed, and they're pretty delighted. It's in the process of being installed.
Yeah, I saw that in the report.
In the process.
We're in the middle of several roofing projects, and we have the unique position in Wilton that the school district doesn't own our buildings, as you know. They're owned by our town. So there's a process of communication that needs to happen between the school districts and the Council on Public Facilities and the Board of Selectmen on what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, how it needs to be done. I would be interested in having some sort of certification from a roofing engineer that says our roofs will last as long as this contract lasts. Has that been considered at this point?
Well, the roof warranty we have expires just about at the end of the contract. It's about the same. That's why we went back to them with that question, and they shortened the length of the contract to 15 years.
So we actually have a warranty on this roof for that period of time.
And Solar City will consult with the manufacturer and the insurer before they even begin to do any work on the roof, and will honor whatever concern they have with respect to the protection of your existing roof.
Right, and just so that's standard practice for us. With all these systems, there's typically a roofer of record that we need to coordinate with at the beginning and just communicate with them on what measures we need to take to maintain the warranty and not to jeopardize the integrity of the roof. We work with a lot of roofing contractors and manufacturers that are familiar with our components, and a lot of times they're fine with it as is. In some instances, there are contractors and manufacturers that tell us, well, these are the measures that we want you to take, and we'll oblige because it's just part of the game. So.
Have you heard of insurance policies to cover the cost of removal and reinstallation should there be some sort of unexpected event?
It's an interesting question. I don't think I have. Have you?
I have not.
It might be something to look into. It's $150,000 or $160,000 to take it off, put it back up.
Yeah.
It isn't small change.
One of the interesting parts about solar, which you'll see in a typical layout, is if you think about a roof and you think about where the majority of your leaks are coming from, they're going to come from the perimeters, and they're going to come from areas that are flashed. And anything that protrudes through the roof casts shade, and we keep our panels X distance away. So if it's 2 feet high, the panels are 6 feet away. If it's a foot high, they're 12. To make a small story short, basically the majority of your leak areas we're away from. Anything underneath the array caused by us putting the array there is basically covered by us. So in essence, you're getting an additional layer on your roof, which is going to reduce the UV damage to the roof and extend the life underneath the panels. But anything caused by us putting our material up there, underneath our material where we're placed, we're responsible for that. So the other areas that are open, which will be minimal, although on your roof it's probably about 30%, will either be an area with a penetration or around the perimeter of the roof, and will be easily accessible.
Just a little bit off that subject, is there any educational value to this?
So one of the other advantages to working with Solar City, we have our own proprietary monitoring software and monitoring system that every client gets a link to their own website showing what the systems are doing in real time and historically. And so once we provide you with that link, there's tons of possibilities you can integrate into, kiosk displays and classroom lessons and things like that.
Have we done that with the other solar panels?
Yes, we have that with them.
Is this the same company, different company?
Different company.
Were they considered for this project?
I don't know. Bay State handled all of that.
Okay. Other questions?
What is the reason given by the Board of Selectmen for pushing their vote off?
Ken Bernard has been in constant conversation with Bay State and Solar. With how many other communities? 9?
7.
7 other communities. He has stated to Bill that he has come to an agreement on the language of the contract which we will have with Solar City. And he was awaiting the written document before he would sign off, obviously, because all of the other communities were going through the same process. So Bill did not want to ask for a vote without that document. He's waiting for Ken to see it, read it, and say, yes, this is what we agreed to. That was the reason. So he asked CCM and Bay State if the board could make that decision on April 1 and still be in time for the auction. And the answer was yes, so that's why he did it.
What if we were to, what if we as a town were to decide that we weren't ready to commit to this yet and we missed the auction this year, pushing us to next year? Is that horrible, or would there be just...
Well, the next auction, and you could
we
answer
lose out
that
on the
better,
cost
would
savings this year,
be,
but-
there's one auction a year for
Right.
100 kW or more. The belief, and for good reason, is that this is it's become a very competitive auction. I think there are 186 bidders, reverse bid, for the sale of the RECs in the first auction. 186. Like any auction, the price is going to go down. So if we wait a year, it's not reasonable to think that our purchase price of the KWH would be lower. It would be probably higher. Would you want to?
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose they set it up
That
as,
was well
as
put.
an auction.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's what we've seen in other reverse auction states, unfortunately, is that the price goes up because it does get more competitive. It doesn't mean it will be in a range that's not acceptable to you guys. But in all likelihood, if there's a neighboring county that's willing to pay 3 cents more, then their ZREC bid maybe is $30 or $40 less, and they end up taking the project. I think the first year or two of every sort of ZREC or SREC opening auction is when you see these really good deals like are on the table right now. I mean, I've been doing it since 2006, and this is probably 40% less than I've seen any PPA offering since I've been in the business.
What percentage of the high school's power requirements will this satisfy?
11.
11%?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other, to answer your question too, Chris, another year is another year in the life of the roof also. It puts us past the roof warranty period. And it may not be a big concern because we normally do get a lot of life out of our roofs, but it's, the farther you go, the more risk you have.
Well, what is the process? What are we being asked? Are we being asked to approve this? Because it's not only our decision.
Yeah, it's not really
Really, it's a board of selectmen will be entering into this agreement with Solar City, but they don't want to do anything on our roof unless the Board of Ed endorses the project. So we're really asking you to endorse the project tonight.
If everything goes smoothly and you go forward, when would installation start? How long would it take? And can the building be occupied during installation?
I'll take a stab at it and hand it over to these guys. We're looking at the results from the ZREC auction, in June, right? So that will give you a go-ahead then if your bid is accepted. Probably next fall for the final contract and some of the engineering work. John has been thinking of next summer of 2014 for the installation, but I know that these guys have said that in similar projects they've done it during the school year and can do things like take cranes in on the weekends so that the quieter work is when classes are being held.
So it is kind of a noisy thing.
Actually, go ahead.
Yeah,
You did it.
Yeah, that's
you
fine.
just finished one.
It's really not very noisy. The most invasive part of the construction is going to be the crane lift, which will just take one day, and we would do that on a Saturday or Sunday. The work that we would be doing during the week, the materials have already been loaded to the roof then, so we're really out of your way. It's not very noisy at all. And so I would say typically all of the school projects that we do across the country, we typically do it during the school year. And it's really not an issue. That's what we just did on Glastonbury High School. And so we have folks there that we could probably put you in touch with if you had questions.
And how long from start to finish for the field house?
For both of these projects, in terms of when we would be on site and in your way, it would be less than a month, less than 4 weeks. I would say probably 4 weeks at the maximum for a system the size of the high school. Now there's going to be some time at the beginning of doing permits and pre-construction meetings, and at the end dealing with inspections with the building inspectors and the utilities. So it's not as if the whole project's going to be done in a month, but the time that we'll really be on site and visible would probably be about a month.
And
How big are the crews?
Good question.
It would vary.
150.
Towards the beginning, when we're still setting up the arrays on the roof, it's a little bit more labor intensive. We may have, between 10 and 20 installers up on the roof. Once the modules are set and it's really just our electricians, it would be a smaller crew, maybe a half dozen.
So you're really looking at next summer, so there's another year to the life of the roof. So then to Chris's question, if you delay another year, you're really
Summer
delaying 2 years.
Right.
So it's true. I mean, but an example like the last ZREC auction, which was April 2012, we had Glastonbury High School installed and operational by December 2012. So it's possible to be done in that time frame. I think one of the thoughts was we don't want to do this during the school year. Let's wait a little longer. On our side of the equation, we usually don't wait another year or wait until school, because typically people are doing things in the summer in schools as well. The noise, there's no drills, there's no jackhammers, there's no their feet walking on the roof maybe. An occasional something might drop, but I think, like you said, it'd be worth talking with the Glastonbury folks about how it interrupted their school, just because their local community nearby, you would know. But from my understanding of talking to them, was like they were like ghosts almost, other than having their staging area where they were. They were
and I think also
seen and not heard.
Yeah. I think also for the direction this conversation's taken, it's probably worth emphasizing that Solar City, we pride ourselves in taking safety and security very seriously. And no matter what time of year we do the installation, whether it's the summer or the fall, we would have as many meetings as necessary with your facilities people and your maintenance people and your safety directors and anyone else who needs to be involved to come up with a staging plan, a roof access plan, a construction timeline that works for you all and that you all are comfortable with, and make sure that we can execute safely with a proper safety plan involving personal protection equipment and everything. So it's something that we really place a lot of emphasis on at the front end, so that just so you guys are aware that if it got to that point, it's certainly something that we would discuss.
Is the administration comfortable?
Yeah, I just had another question on that, and Mr. Marola may have covered this on Monday, and I may have missed it, but why is the ZREC auction, kind of the timing of that, such a moving target? Is that something that, as there are a lot of variables that they're dealing with, it seems that this big an auction, you would think that there would be a star on the calendar in April X.
Well,
maybe a dumb question, but I don't
after the
understand why.
legislation passed, Public Act 1180 passed at the end of the last legislative session, the utilities were tasked with coming up with a plan on how we're going to actually execute this. It took until April 4th it took to December 31st for the utilities to submit the plan. It took until April 4th of 2012 for the Public Utility Regulatory Authority to approve that plan. Last year was the first time out. It took a much longer cycle of time for them to go through, as Bruce mentioned, many bids. They'd never done it before, waiting and getting results. We think that the award process is going to be much shorter this year as opposed to last year, but it is done in April. So if there's a star on the calendar, the star is set in April. We don't have the exact date in April, but the plan says every April we're going to have this medium and large ZREC auction, followed by what we think will be in June for the small ZREC, which is not really an auction, it's an application process. They take the results of the medium projects, add 10%, and then you come up to bat for your small projects in that process. But April's the month that was picked to do this. It could be in part because the net metering rules in Connecticut call for the end of the net metering year to be at the end of March. So then there's if you've produced more than you've used and the utility has to buy it, that's the period of time over which that's it. It ends. What's left in your imaginary bank. So it could have been something on that basis. But April's the month. It's going to be every April for the next 5 years.
I'm still confused.
6 months ago, we didn't know what a ZREC was, right, Gary? And now we're signing a contract for it.
Do you have any...
I just don't understand that if you have
Ken
this
is
big a
being
deal, if you have this big a deal, isn't there some sort of notice that is given? And it seems kind of...
Oh, they'll
I can't
announce
get
the
my
date.
arms around
Sure. They'll announce the date, and then people will submit their proposals in. I don't know exactly what the notice period is, but you have to understand that we started this process, as Bruce mentioned, in September. There are others out there who started their process maybe before September, so they're going to be very much ready to go. They're waiting for the utility company to come out and say, auction's going to be on this date, and then they will have whatever the period of time is to submit their proposals. So on the one hand, you think it's a moving target, but it's really, there's been a lot of work that's been done, 6 months up to this date to get to this point.
I think Ken is being very modest, but he was able to negotiate a contract that is not even extended to Comstock. He was able to negotiate a term of 15 years, comparable to the warranty, but a fixed KWH fee for 15 years. That's very significant. That was not in the original contract that all the other municipalities looked at.
Well, I think it's illogical. I was going to say, I think it's logical because if you look at the increase in efficiency in solar cells in the last 15 years, math would say that, or history would say that there's a good chance 15 years or 10 years from now, they're going to be a lot more efficient than they are
There's
today.
no question about that.
So prices are going to go down, in theory.
But their prices don't.
Oh, they might.
They're overhead.
Yeah, what we've seen really over time is a balance in the decrease in price of materials and then the decrease in value of incentives. So when a Z-Rec in New Jersey was at $750 and a panel was at $3 a watt, now a panel is more like $1 a watt, and a Z-Rex in New Jersey was so we've seen a balance, but it's nice. It's gone in the right direction. Power's definitely gotten cheaper in power purchase agreements, no question. No question.
If technology improves such that the panels that are installed in our field house become dinosaurish, will you upgrade our materials? No?
Not. The reality is that there's the very first solar cells that were installed in the 1950s on buildings. A lot of them are still working now. Systems from 1970s are still producing now. And so it becomes a question of, well, is it worth it to replace the panels with something more efficient? There's a large cost to that. And if you have a system that's generating electricity for free at that point, even if it's not quite as efficient as the newer panels on the market, is it really worth the expenditure of replacing them and reinstalling them?
Well, it's a fair question then. Is the contract written in such a way that we're buying 228,000 kilowatts, or we're buying everything that those panels produce?
Everything they produce.
So if technology quadruples, you could force us to buy more power at that same price. You could force us to buy 4 times the power at that same price.
Not produced by those panels and not under the contract. Their maximum is 110% of what they have estimated production will be.
I think what we're talking about is a shift in technology that makes new technology capable of a 4x improvement. They put it in their existing system and force us to buy that.
No, but we've written a specific guarantee and a specific quantity that these panels will produce. It's possible that these super panels could come out and we could approach you all and say, hey, listen, we can generate 4 times the power at the same cost, but we have it's written in what we're going to produce, percentage, so we couldn't increase that and just rewrite the contract.
I think that's something I'd still like to make sure that our lawyers look at and are comfortable with that as an out.
Who's going to select the structural engineer?
We have several consultants that we work with that typically we would select. If you guys have an engineer that you work with that you prefer us to contact, we can certainly approach them and see if we can work it out to be able to use them as our engineer.
Is the Board of Selectmen going to look at that? Is this going to go under the Council of Public Facilities?
The selection of the consultant, we hadn't planned to do that. And as the gentleman said, if we have a consultant that we would prefer to work with, or even to qualify the work that their consultant did, we're free to do that. It would not be a very significant expense.
And we had just for commentary purposes in Glastonbury, there had been a consultant that had already come out and looked at 3 buildings for a previous CEFIA grant that they didn't win. So it was in our best interest to use someone that had already done some survey of the building, came back out, did it again, but it was a recommendation on their part. So, if someone's familiar with these buildings, we'd absolutely
I
entertain
would
it.
just replace the roof in 2008, I guess.
Yes.
And certainly at that point, we had a company that
Sure.
did work on it, so like someone who knew it.
Yeah,
and
we
understood
use
it.
PVH, they have a structural team.
I'm sorry. I know that we're going well beyond our agenda time here, so I'd like to try to wrap it up if we can. Last couple of questions.
The other night, at the Board of Selectmen, the gentleman from Solar City said that they'd be willing to have anybody who wished to visit the Glastonbury facility or others to take advantage of that. Has Bill approached you on any of that? On that?
He hasn't, but I had to leave town and right after that meeting, so.
I think what I'd like to do is poll the board on their thoughts, and I'll preface it with, we're being asked to endorse this project. We all obviously still have some questions, I think. Would it perhaps make sense to provide a qualified endorsement that says it's predicated on the Energy Commission's endorsement of it and also the Board of Selectmen's endorsement of it?
Well, if the Board of Selectmen doesn't endorse it, then nothing happens.
Right.
Right.
And the Energy Commission has endorsed it.
They have?
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
On the basis of, and one of our members is a consultant on clean energy and alternative energy systems worldwide. He's familiar with certainly a lot more than I am and others. So on the basis of the reasonableness of the estimate of savings in production, and of course the environmental benefit, on that basis we endorsed it. Not our purview to look at a contract. It's Ken Bernard's area. Where is the-
Well, I would just say, I guess the engineer analysis of the roof,
Lengthen this meeting.
I suppose it could come back and say it meets minimal requirements, but there may be something in that report that is concerning to us as a board that even though it passes the minimum to go forward, might give us pause to say, maybe we don't want to, and then I guess I would want us to have that flexibility to pull back our endorsement.
Well,
Should that be the case?
I think what he said earlier, when the structural engineer comes in and does his report, they're going to be working with the building department and as far as what loads the roof will have to be able to handle and whatever it takes to get the proper permits. So I would hope that through that process, we would have the reassurance that, that whatever report they came up with, whatever determinations they came up with, would meet the building codes and be able to handle it.
And with a big, what you said before, like a big safety barrier is what I think you referred to it.
Right. Well, when you're doing projects like these on schools, the building code actually requires a higher, it's called an importance factor, an occupancy factor, that for a school or a hospital you have to apply rather than some maintenance facility that's empty all day. So that gets factored into the calculations anytime we're working on a school. And that's absolutely right. The building code has requirements about the required snow loads, required wind loads, and all the other factors these buildings have to be designed to. And they have to put together a report and calculations saying that this roof structure is capable of supporting the requirements of the building code and the additional weight imposed by the system. And they'll have to sign and seal the calculations and report, and the building inspector and plan reviewer will have to approve of it and accept it. So.
Cool.
I just want to make sure that there is no expense that we're going to incur by endorsing this evening.
Laura?
I think it sounds really interesting and exciting to think of saving $16,000 to $20,000 a year in our bills, and you've done a wonderful job answering all the questions.
Chris?
Assuming that all of the structural and financial questions that we raised tonight are addressed by, if our town council is satisfied, our Energy Commission has given its endorsement, and if the Board of Selectmen goes along with it, I think it's a great project, and I'm all for saving, and I love the fact that there could be an educational component.
Okay, so we'd be okay with an endorsement?
Yeah.
I would say, based on the understanding that the Board of Selectmen
Yeah, I'm
endorse
certainly
it.
no expert on receive, credits.
Unless the Board of Selectmen votes to
I
approve.
tried.
Okay. Do we need a motion on that then?
I think we do.
Probably.
Motion to approve?
Well, are we making this conditional on Board of Selectmen and on?
Nothing happens.
Well, the
unless-
interesting thing is, there's no
Yeah.
need to, because if the Board of Selectmen doesn't endorse it, it's
Well, we're
not
approving
going.
the concept.
Right.
We're not approving like,
Right.
Right, the Board of
We're gonna end
Selectmen,
up
the Board of
writing it.
Selectmen will be the ones entering into the contract with Solar City.
We're going to end up writing a memo that says we endorse it.
I move that we endorse the solar energy project.
Second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And you will be removing 515,876 pounds of CO2 from the atmosphere.
Bruce,
You'll be
what's that number?
Every
Huh?
year.
I'm going to hold you to it. 500.
That's a lot of weight.
I'll leave it.
500.
49 cars removed from the road and equal to 554 barrels of oil burned.
Thank you very
I've
much.
printed a few presentations. I'll leave them on this little tray just about.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Yeah, I'd like to
Oh, here
actually
it
see
is.
how they're held up by this ballast.
Yeah, there's a really good picture.
Thank you.
We now move on to the consent agenda. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at that? Any questions, comments on the consent agenda? A motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Board Chair's report. First and foremost, I want to recognize and thank Mr. Canty for his tremendous work for the town of Wilton over, I believe it's 26 years. We were informed and with very mixed emotions accepted your resignation. And when I say mixed emotions, we're obviously going to miss Mr. Canty, but we're thrilled for the opportunity that this provides you. And I want to recognize the work that I know that you've done since I've been on the board, not only with our curriculum, but also with our data teams, the work that you've done with the high school. I know that your legacy is going to live with Wilton for generations to come, and I want to say thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
My daughters appreciate your math teaching.
I should point out that Mr. Canty's frugal nature caused him to leave one school district with blue and white colors and go to another with the same colors. So
Wait, no, that's white and blue, isn't it?
Yeah, they're waiting.
It's all yours.
Okay. I have several items tonight I'd like to share. At our March 7th meeting, the Board of Education approved the recommendation to adopt an all-day, everyday kindergarten program for that would begin in the 2013-14 school year at Miller Driscoll. Tonight, I want to clarify the costs associated with the staffing model that we will implement to support daily literacy instruction, not only for kindergarten students in our full-day program, but for our grade 1 and grade 2 students as well. In our current extended day program, kindergarten teachers receive no paraprofessional support except in those instances when paraprofessionals are assigned to work with kindergarten students receiving special education services as part of their individualized education plans. Next year, with the increased time available for kindergarten students to engage in daily literacy instruction as part of the full-day program, 7 paraprofessionals will be assigned to support the kindergarten classes for 90 minutes per day, 60 minutes approximately for reading and 30 minutes for writing. Same paraprofessionals will be assigned to the same kindergarten classes every day. The paraprofessional staffing for the kindergarten program will be found through redeployment of professionals that are currently assigned to assist grade 1 and 2 teachers. We will be able to accomplish this redeployment of paraprofessional staffing from grades 1 and 2 to kindergarten at a cost savings, reducing our overall paraprofessional staffing at Miller Driscoll School by 2.6 full-time equivalents. To fill in behind the redeployment of paraprofessionals from grades 1 and 2 to kindergarten, reading teachers next year will be assigned to work with grades 1 and 2 teachers during their 60-minute reading block. This will require the addition of 2.35 full-time equivalent reading teachers in the coming school year. Together, reading teachers and classroom teachers will provide first and second grade students with necessary reading instruction, intervention, and enrichment. Funds for this staffing model to support literacy instruction will be realized from the cost savings that are part of the elimination of the half-day kindergarten bus runs and the decrease in overall paraprofessional staffing at Miller Driscoll School that I just alluded to. Let me just again repeat the numbers of this. By eliminating the noon bus runs for the kindergarten, the cost savings will be $154,952. The decrease of 2.6 full-time equivalent paraprofessionals will reduce costs by $70,784. However, we're adding 2.35 reading teachers at a cost of $141,837. The total savings, then, the total net figure is $83,899. Meanwhile, I did want to reaffirm that in addition to the paraprofessional support that was not part of the extended day program, kindergarten students will also have the benefit of working with reading teachers. Currently, reading teachers assist a kindergarten classroom each full long day afternoon. Since children attend long days only 2 days a week, each reading teacher is available for each class 2 days a week for 15 minutes or 30 minutes a week. Next year, toward the end of the kindergarten day, there will be a block of time for students to participate in small groups devoted to structured play, centers, and extensions. Reading teachers will assist each kindergarten classroom for 15 minutes during that block for a total of 75 minutes weekly. In conclusion, we believe that the investment in this staffing model for literacy instruction that is part of the full-day kindergarten program next year at Miller Driscoll School will benefit all students. We believe the staffing plan is both educationally sound and economically feasible. I'm hopeful that this summary helps provide the community with a fuller understanding of our plan for K-2 literacy instruction in the coming year. Second note, I'm pleased to report that the Wilton Education Foundation and our counseling team at Middlebrook School held the 16th annual Career Day on Wednesday. 65 parent volunteers participated as presenters. The career clusters included business and finance, retail tourism, engineering technology, health sciences, careers in the law, and arts and media. I had the opportunity to speak to several of the parent volunteers, many of whom you know. They're doctors, lawyers, businessmen and women in the community, cartoonists, one's a cartoonist. And I had the opportunity to attend a session that was led by one of our alumni who is working for Facebook, Stephanie Smriglio, class of 2000. And as I've listened to presentations over the years, I've been impressed with the way presenters reinforce the importance of learning the skills and content that we emphasize in schools, while also pointing out the fact that success is a result of self-discipline and hard work. So they really do give kids, they say, you don't walk in as a top-level investment banker right out of college. That, there's a process that you go through learning to become an investment banker or a lawyer or a business person. And I think that's really helpful. Special thanks to the Wilton Education volunteers, Renee Cahill, who I believe has run this program on behalf of WEF for the last 3 or 4 years, Trish Weber and Michelle Tupper, who were co-volunteers, and our counseling staff at Middlebrook, Bill Gerundo, Bonnie O'Brien, and Ann McManus, who again did an outstanding job of coordinating the planning for each of the sessions. I think it's important to note that in addition to programs such as Career Day, one at Middlebrook and then one later on in the spring in the high school, the foundation has provided strong support for technology, the arts, and professional development. So yet another example of the great work WEF is doing. A third note is earlier this month, as you remember, the Board of Ed member Karen Burke presented the revised statement of requirements for the Miller Driscoll building project. The board had approved the revision. On Monday evening, Karen and I attended the Board of Selectmen's meeting where we listen to the comments and questions on the Miller-Driscoll Statements of Requirements that Selectmen will be forwarding to the Council on Public Facilities, the group that advises Selectmen on town building projects. Some of these questions included: does the revised SOR meet the objectives for the project that were developed by the Board of Selectmen? Is the language of the document sufficiently clear to write the educational specifications? Are there material omissions that need to be addressed? Has security been sufficiently addressed in the statement of requirements? Will architects have experience in this area? Will site coverage guidelines be impacted by an access road around the building? Is seeking reimbursement from the state a viable option, and what does such a procedure do to the project timeline? And then how much will technology upgrades in the project affect the ultimate cost of the project? So these were some of the questions that they have forwarded to the Council on Public Facilities for their consideration. I'm excited to comment on the fact that the building committee has been constituted. Citizen members John Guth, Bruce Hampson, Ray Tobiasen, Rich Tomasetti, and Jim Newton. Board members, Karen representing this board, Dick Dubow representing the Board of Selectmen, and Jim Meinhold representing the Board of Finance. And then our school members, Cheryl Jensen-Gerner as principal, Ann Paul as Director of Special Services, Dr. Fred Rabczynski, Director of the Preschool, John Murphy, District Supervisor of Custodial and Maintenance Services. This is really a great group, and we look forward to working with them as the project moves forward. And again, I'd like to again thank and salute Cheryl for the great support she has provided. She knows, as I've said to this board, every nook and cranny in Miller-Driscoll, every leak, every need of the building, and she's a really important asset, as are Ann and Fred, who really are quite knowledgeable about the preschool operations. So, and John, of course, is a building in charge of our building. So it's a great committee, great community people, solid board membership. So we're really hoping that this will give this project some momentum, and we can get beyond the talking phase and get more into a planning stage. Fourth thing I wanted to cover tonight has to do with the administrative hiring process that we go through in this town. Jane, as you know, oversees the human resources aspect of our operations. And as you know, we're currently going through a period of administrative change that's a result of the combination of some retirements, and resignations, and that we go through as part of normal course of business in the school district. Once a vacancy is created by either retirement or people are treasonous. I couldn't let him take all those nice comments. I had to spoil it. But once a vacancy is created by either of these situations, we go through a long, detailed, and thorough process of finding the best qualified employee to replace the staff members. I thought it might be helpful just to briefly review quickly the steps that we go through in recruiting quality staff to staff our schools. We go through, at the beginning phases, we go through a job description review. Prior to this posting, the job description is reviewed. We'll look at it with the cabinet, or as appropriate with the principal in the school, if it's say for an assistant principal or athletic director, to make sure that the job description reflects the work and responsibilities of the current position. The posting, then once that's done, the posting is made, and typically the time frame is 3 to 4 weeks, depending on when it falls in the calendar year. All job vacancies are posted on the district's employment website. CT-REAP, which is the Connecticut Alliance in conjunction with our Cooperative Educational Services, and as needed, the CEA teacher website. And again, this way of advertising has really supplanted, I think it's safe to say, Jane, the previous newspaper ads that we would put out and so on. So people use the internet to search, and our own website. So that's how posting works. The candidate screening, as applications are received, and once the posting closes, the applications are screened by the Director of Human Resources and the administrator with direct responsibility, supervision of the vacant position. We generally have a combination of internal and external candidates for most of our openings, and I think it's important to point out of our total administrative staff, and there are 23 administrators in this district, 61% of us came from other districts who are currently in administrative positions. 61% of us came from other districts. During the past 5 years, our HR director, our director of special education, our director of technology, and 2 assistant principals, one at Miller Driscoll and one at the high school, came from other districts. These hires represent 22% of our administrative team. So we have a balance of people who have come from within and people, those of us, myself included, who have come from other places. The interview process, successfully chosen candidates are interviewed by a panel of stakeholders, and the exact membership of such panels changes depending upon the position. Candidates move through a series of interviews prior to being offered the position. There's also, commensurate with that, and correlated with that, in-depth research reference checks, and we do this in a variety of ways, but generally detailed phone background checks are conducted for each of the candidates. And then finally, the announcement of the selected candidate. After the final interview, references are checked, candidates offered a position. We bring it to the board with a change notice, and we then, once that process is complete, we issue a press release. So that's basically the process we go through in recruiting and hiring new administrative personnel. On those notes, along that line, we have been engaged, as you know, in a search for a new athletic director for Wilton High School to replace Mr. Christy Hayes, who is retiring after 10 years of service to the Wilton Public Schools. He will retire June 30th. Our posting for this position generated 47 applicants, 12 of whom didn't actually follow through with the final application, another 12 of whom lacked proper certification. So of the 23 candidates who met those qualifications, the search committee interviewed 7 candidates. One individual, Mr. Chris McDougall, who is currently the athletic director at Brookfield High School, emerged as the clear finalist in our extensive and competitive search process. This process included a round of interviews with a large panel that included student athletes, coaches, the athletic department secretary, booster club presidents, teachers, and administrators. The second round of interviews required the finalist candidates to respond to case studies and scenarios in athletic administration before a smaller panel of coaches, teachers, and administrators. The final interview was with our central office cabinet. All of us spent an hour and a half or so on the other day, yesterday, I guess, with Mr. McDougall. And we concluded that he will be a great addition to our high school and the broader Wilton community. Mr. McDougall is an experienced athletic director who brings a wonderful skill set to the position. He's knowledgeable about the SEAC policies and guidelines. He has extensive experience in hiring, evaluating, and developing coaches. We've learned from a variety of sources that Mr. McDougall is deeply dedicated to student athletes and is very clear about the importance of emphasizing academics as the primary focus in a student's high school experience. Under his leadership for the past 3 years, Brookfield High School has been awarded the Michaels Cup for the overall quality of its athletic program. Mr. McDougall's professional references noted he's a person of strong character who will serve as an excellent role model for our student athletes and coaches. He is known to be a great communicator, is organized and skilled at the logistical aspects of athletic administration. He possesses a strong work ethic and has a track record of dedication to his student athletes, coaches, and athletic program. Brookfield High School has experienced increased athletic participation rates under his leadership. We are really, really excited about Mr. McDougall's appointment and look forward to working with him when he assumes his new position with us on July 1st. So we're thrilled to be able to report that to you this evening. On the note of athletics, we have had a very successful winter sports season at the high school. Our girls basketball program tied for first place in the regular season. They went to the semifinals in FCX and second round in the states. As you know, we had some tragic injury that really affected the end of the season, and we wish Casey well as she continues to recover. Boys basketball, the FCX, they made it to the semifinals in FCX and in the quarterfinals in state. So they had, again, a really good season. Gymnastics, our team was the FCX champions, and Class M state runner-up. Boys ski team were the Class S state champions, again. And indoor track girls program, Class L runner-up, and boys swimming, Class L state runner-up. So we had a terrific season, and the spring sports have begun. I see people running around, although snow on the ground. Finally, this is something that we really want to emphasize, and we'll make sure we get this out in a variety. It's our town meeting will not be held on May 7th, our annual meeting on the town budget.
It will be held.
It will be held. It will not be held at the David F. I got a script here.
It's a good thing we all have copies.
That's why I do that, so I don't make stuff up. The David F. Clune Center is not available. It will be in heavy tech rehearsals for Les Mis, which is going to be shown, I believe, the week right after or so the town meeting. So the town meeting will be held May 7th at Middlebrook Auditorium at 7:30.
Thank you. Committee reports.
Take a drink.
We were on schedule. Committee reports. Do we have any committee reports to report this evening? I do want to just briefly say I believe the Wilton Education Foundation musical performance, was it last weekend? Acoustic Wilton was a big success. So thank you everybody that participated in that. And
Memorial Day weekend 5K is coming up.
Yes, and also the Memorial Day weekend 5K is coming up. So I've got to pass because of my Achilles, but the rest of you should get out and exercise. I strongly support it. We now move on to policy 1331, naming of school facilities.
Okay. I did not want to be left out of the facilities discussion tonight, so I thought what a great policy to bring. I say that in jest. It just so happened that it was the same night as the solar and all the other conversations about facilities. So, as part of my duties and responsibilities as assigned by the superintendent, I have the honor of getting to really look through a lot of the policies of the Board of Education. In doing so and reviewing that, it was came to my attention that policy 1331 had been reviewed by the board on January 24th of 2002, but had not moved any further. It just so happened to be part of the budget cycles and time and calendars and days and things get away. So I really examined that policy. What you have in front of you is a more comprehensive policy than was presented and initially reviewed in 2002. The first section of this policy is what the board initially reviewed and approved. From the section starting the general procedure and down, that was language that was not included, but should be, in my estimation, as well as the board's attorneys, which really helps to very kind of specifically lay out exactly what the steps and policies and guidelines that the board should use when making a determination regarding the naming of a school district facility.
So this language is new?
It is new since 2002,
Did you draft this?
No,
language?
no. This is language that I received.
You do everything else.
Well, yes, but naming of school district facilities is something that I've worked with our board's attorney. Shipman and Goodwin, they have, Julie Fay has been fantastic in working with me, and they help many districts write, revise, and create policies. So this is something that they
Do we
have.
have a definition of a school facility, and how broad is it?
Or no?
Or narrow?
I don't have a technical definition. Where the students, space that the students occupy for the purposes of education would be my broad definition.
It could be a wing of a building.
Correct.
It could be the field house. It could be named after somebody.
So we
a
could
sports
have-
complex.
So we could have the Chris Finkelstein Cubby Hall?
And we want it.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yes,
But
it's the first
again, part of the reason for doing this is that boards, sometimes it can be under tragic circumstances. Sometimes it can be, just as a overwhelming sense of appreciation for someone, and it's really having been there and seen how some of the challenges that boards face. We thought it's important to try to have a policy in place prior to something like that happening. For example, sometimes people, if somebody passes away suddenly, there's this outpouring of grief. All well-intended, and people come to a board and say, well, we want to name up after somebody, or if somebody leaves, there's a sense, well, we want to, or retires, or, So we thought it is really important for the board to have these guidelines in advance, so that, that you can say, look, we've thought about this, and there are criteria that, and again, this is on for a read, that the board is comfortable with, that would be used were there to be a sense that someone wanted to name a wing or a building or a sports complex or after someone.
Is this something that should be defined in the policy? What a school facility is?
Yeah.
I can certainly
Yeah,
take that
we
question
can-
back
that's-
to the attorneys and get clarification on that, certainly.
But again, I think, and again, my guess is that it will be either a building, a part of a building, an outdoor facility
Well, yeah, 'cause you've
that
got
are
these
part of
fields.
the grounds,
You've got
building
these
and grounds.
fields
Okay.
that are owned by the town,
I think that's a fair question.
but then do we...
Right, it is.
But we have the right to name them, right?
Right.
No offense to not naming Cubby Hall, but...
No, I can certainly get clarification on that and bring that back to the next meeting.
And, we do have a lot of our facilities here. You look at Fujitani Field, you look at Memorial Stadium,
Right.
Christine Lilly
Yes.
Field.
Right.
We're the foundation. I've been in districts where, as part of the major gifts campaign of a schools foundation, names, has a lead gift of huge amount of money. And that sometimes may lead to a naming. Sometimes people do that, and we're going to be talking about it later tonight. Sometimes people give very, very generous gifts and don't wish to have anything. They want to do it anonymously. So we'll get a clarification of that gift.
So
I
like, for
think that
example, like
makes
the
sense.
Christine Lilly Field, is that named by the board that was in place at the time, or is that
I'll
named by-
defer to our historian. I'm trying to, because I was, Tim's looking.
Casually look over your
I don't remember what the genesis of that was, and I should know.
I think it was a community effort.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, I don't recall it coming in front of the Board of Education.
Yeah. Thank you.
So now then, establishing a policy like this would then say, if that field falls under the definition of school
Right.
grounds, then it would then come to
Right.
at least a final approval.
Well, there would be
by
a
the board.
process.
A
There's
process
a
by
process
which it
that
would
goes
come to
through.
us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
and we're not
committee that's
suggesting go back and
formed
rename anything.
No, no, no,
just
no, no,
sort of
right, but-
prospectively.
Oh, yeah, no.
Well, I'm sure Julie and Tim, they probably suggested that we look at this.
Absolutely.
Well, going
Tim
back
more
to-
so than anyone.
Going
Tim
back
more
to
so
the
than
fact
anybody,
that we don't own the buildings.
Or
Right, well, that's
or the
yeah.
fields.
Or the
Yeah.
fields. Yeah,
I'm thinking
so-
Christine Lilly was done by the Board of Select.
Right.
But more recently,
I don't know.
that's now.
I don't know.
Yeah, were you on the rec commission at that time?
No, but when I was on Parks and Rec, we didn't name
Yeah.
any fields. But I think Nick Nick went through the Board of Selectmen.
And I think some things were named without Board of Ed input or, you know. And again, we felt it might be helpful it would be helpful to have a process. So.
Do we want to also define what an extended period of service is? Do we want to, I'm asking, do we want to say, like, having served the district for a time period of at least X number of years?
I think it depends, because some people might have a huge impact in, you know, 5
very short
years
time.
and positively.
Well,
I
I don't know,
getting
I just-
into a philosophical debate on that.
Yeah, it can
I mean,
get,
you're-
it is difficult.
You could have somebody here for a very short period of time that will have a lasting impact for whatever reason.
well, again, what's a short period of time?
Right.
A year, 2 years,
But
10
it would
years?
probably be better, I mean, I would think it would be better to leave that up
Broad.
to the time in which you're looking to name something and have
Well, but
that
then you
group
get into
discuss
a
it at that
situation where
time.
you have a significant building or a wing named after a person who people scratch their head and say, you know, who was this person and what did they do?
Mhm.
Well, the board at that time wanted to be nice to this person.
With no offense to people that have been named in the past, it's always going to happen within
Mm-hmm.
a generation or two.
But I'm saying, should we correct that and not allow that to continue?
And then everything would be named George Washington.
No. If we were to say, we define minimum, we don't want to consider giving someone this extreme honor unless they've served our district, our schools, for a minimum of, 10 years,
Right.
15 years. I mean, that's just a huge, huge honor to have
Right.
your name put on a building.
I think
That's
it's
why
reasonable.
these things, you
Yeah.
can imagine without any policy, I mean, it
Yeah.
adds it even further layer.
It's a reasonable point of consideration. Tied to that same one, and I'm not sure we're going to answer right here, is how do we deal with the fact that we don't own the buildings, we don't own
Yeah.
don't own the fields? There probably needs to be some conversation that goes on with the Board of Selectmen. I don't think they'd like us naming their assets any more than we'd like them naming ours. So
Certainly.
I'm not sure how to incorporate that, but that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, just because we establish a policy doesn't necessarily give us
Any authority
the
to do it.
authority to do it.
We can certainly look at who technically has the authority to do that and then
Yeah.
come back and let you know.
Okay. Thank you.
Certainly.
We now move on to the Wilton Education Evaluation Support Plan. That's being presented by Mrs. Anderson.
Yes. See if that's getting quicker. Okay, so last time we were all here, I presented a elevator speech, I would call it. While it was certainly a long elevator ride, provided you with a overview of the framework for which the state has developed through their educational reform bill, the components that all districts across the state are required to have as part of their teacher and administrator evaluation plans. Tonight, what I want to do is go through, and some of these slides you have seen before. I will elaborate just slightly on some of them. But the reason that you are getting such a detailed understanding and presentation is because ultimately you will, as the Board of Education, have to vote and approve both the administrators and the teachers' evaluation plan and submit it to the state. On the form that I have in here, it requires the superintendent's signature as well as the board chair signature for submission to the State Department of Education. This is something that will be done every year. So it's not that we are presenting it and then we'll submit it, and then whenever we so feel like we need to go back to reevaluate it. It's something we will have to reevaluate and resubmit every year. The first year, currently, that the legislation requires all districts to have their new teacher evaluation plan is July 1st, 2013. As I said last time, it is an ever-evolving process, document, set of requirements. So that is still the day. We will see in a few weeks that that's still the day, but we will continue to move forward as that is the day. In this current school year, there are 10 districts that are participating in what the state has called the SEED program. It's the state's evaluation model. Bridgeport and Norwalk are the only Fairfield County school districts that are involved in this effort. This is a journey, to say the least. It began in August on the 16th at our Summer Leadership Day. At that point, we had Carissa Niehoff from the State Department come, and she spoke to all the administrators and presented kind of a general outline of the requirements as stated in the Education Reform Bill. From there, I have attended 12 to date CES meetings, which are gatherings of local HR directors, assistant superintendents, sometimes curriculum folk, who have come together to discuss their evaluation systems, the direction their districts are taking, and also we have spent a tremendous amount of time just talking about all the different requirements and how we will meet those requirements going forward. Unfortunately, Tim had the wonderful foresight to go ahead and say every month we are going to meet as administrators to discuss. At that time, he wanted to really talk about instructional and curricular things, but it just so worked out nicely that I was able to kind of hold up those meetings, and now they have become the leadership meetings about the evaluation plan. Is that a fair descriptor? So it's been a great opportunity for all of the building principals to come together along with the central office staff to review this ever-evolving document and provide input into what we are ultimately getting to, which will hopefully be a finalized plan. We also have the Staff Appraisal Committee, which consists of 18 different staff members, both teachers and administrators from across the district. They have been very helpful in reviewing and critiquing and developing, collaborating with us on coming up with a teacher evaluation plan that meets the benchmarks that we must have. In addition, at any moment, we can receive a memo from the State Department of Education outlining some new policies and critiques, and we have. I presented here 2 Thursdays ago, Friday morning. We got a memo from the state saying things have changed, and they had changed pretty monumentally. So it happens, and we have to be responsive, and we change direction as need be. But it is something that has consumed a large portion of the year. It has been good, high-quality work that we've been engaged in, but it's a mighty task. Throughout this, when you see that I've highlighted something in red, that, well, not on this slide, so sorry. Sorry, I'm not really on my best game, sorry. So as I said 2 weeks ago, that this is an ever-evolving process. When we presented last Thursday, I had at that point indicated that the state, in their evaluation model, was using the Danielson teacher rubric for evaluation. Friday morning, when we received the state memo, the state had indicated that they will no longer be using the Danielson rubric. They are now going to write their own. So all state plans that have said that they will do what the state is doing, Danielson, are now at a crossroads and have to make a decision. Do we continue on with Danielson, or do we go ahead and we use the state's model? Our position has always been that we want to align ourselves as much with the state as we can, because we know that's where the greatest amount of resources will be available to us, is if we align ourselves with the state, because they have an invested interest in providing professional development opportunities and resources for those who go along with them. So we have decided that that is in fact what we will do. And so it has meant that my intention this evening was to be able to present to you this document. You will know, and I'm sure very sadly on Friday when you opened up your materials, that it wasn't included. And it's simply because at this point now, what we thought was pretty close to a finalized document is on hold. It will be reevaluated. We will look at it, go through it again, and we will mesh it back together and have something for you hopefully in 3 or 4 weeks' time.
So we're not doing the hybrid? We're just adopting the state's plan?
No, I'm sorry. I don't want to mislead you in that. We are doing a hybrid.
Okay.
But what we are doing is the state has now changed their standards-based evaluation form their standards-based evaluation performance measure. They were going with Charlotte Danielson's rubric. Now they are writing their own, which they have stated they believe will be better aligned to ELL learners, the SRBI. So that portion, we will be changing along with the state. Okay,
So how much of the work that we've already done goes out the window?
Oh, I would say only probably about 25% in all honesty.
How many hours is that?
Oh, I can't go into that. I can't focus on that. I'm just going to focus on the good work that we've done. We have more work that we're going to do, and it's going to be okay. It's going to be good quality work that will come out of it.
I respect that, but we are
Well,
going
is
to
this
a
worth
budget season,
pointing out?
and that's a cost to us. So I need to
There
understand
absolutely is. I can't quantify for you tonight what that cost is.
that. If you could get that to us, we'd
Yeah.
appreciate that. We want
I think
our
Hartford
dear
needs
friends
to
at the-
know.
Well, we want Hartford to know, but we want our Board of Finance friends to understand we don't always have control over what happens to us.
I will certainly do my best.
And we'll let Gail and Tony know as well. Thank you.
Certainly. So what has not changed are the core requirements for the teacher evaluation system. I presented these to you 2 weeks ago, and they still remain. The percentages are still the same. Tonight, what I want to do is just give you a little bit more detail about what those actually will look like. So now, from this point forward, when you see text that is in red, that is reflective of pieces of our current evaluation plan that exist now that we will be able to just carry over into our next evaluation plan. Wilton's current evaluation system requires all non-tenured teachers to be evaluated every year for 4 years or 2 years, depending on if they're in an accelerated tenure program, and then places tenured teachers on an observation cycle where they're reviewed every 4 years. This plan, our new plan for the 13-14, will require all teachers every year to be evaluated 3 times, depending upon the number of years in your non-tenured cycle, and then subsequently, depending upon your rating, whether you be determined to be exemplary, proficient, developing, or below standard, that will also impact. But it varies between 2 formals and 1 informal observation, and 1 formal and 2 informal observations. Okay. I'm sorry, I meant to say this at the onset. If you have questions as we're going, please stop me, because I find that that's probably the best way to handle it as opposed to waiting to the end. So are there questions about the observation component?
I'd just like you to reiterate the fact that in the past, tenured teachers only had to be evaluated once every 4 years, and now it's every year.
There was goal setting that was going on. There were places for which administrators and teachers were sitting and goal setting and monitoring progress towards achieving professional development goals, student goals, observation practice goals. But in terms of a formal write-up per se, that is something that is cycled through. Yes.
And it used to happen every 4 years, and now it's going to happen every year.
Correct.
And that's an increase in manpower to make that happen.
Tremendous.
Thank you.
The load on the administrators in terms of the number of observations has, what would you say, Julia, tripled?
Easily. And this is, this is probably the best point at which to disclose this. We will be submitting to the state an observation number that is below their ideal. The state, in their SEED evaluation plan, requires 6 observations of every teacher every year. The minimum standard that they set out in the Ed Reform Bill was 4. We are going forward and submitting 3.
How successful do you think we'll be at that?
I have been told from people at the state that there is an understanding of the need to perhaps be a little bit more flexible than they first identified that they needed to be in that area. In addition, the state, probably 4 weeks ago, I have the exact date of the memo, I can get it, but submitted or presented what they received to be, or called a flexibility option, where all districts in the state could choose to roll this out in a more flexible manner. Their idea of flexible was districts determining a certain percentage of either schools or teachers who would fall under the new evaluation plan while keeping the remaining percentage of teachers in the old evaluation plan. In some places, maybe setting up kind of a survivor mentality where you're vying and competing against who's going to get to be in one group or the other. Our administrators and our staff appraisal committee plan said these are not fair options for us as educators and to be collaborative colleagues. And so we're going forward with the state's preferred adoption model, which is 100% in every school for every administrator and teacher. And so my hope is that by taking their preferred implementation plan, that they will concede one observation for us.
And will you be able to, at some point, give us an estimated number of man-hours per observation?
Absolutely. Sure.
And that includes prep, the observation itself, and
yes,
follow-up
because
reporting?
Absolutely. For each observation, and as you will see, there's a pre-conference that's required, a post-conference that's required. There's also a goal-setting meeting that's required, a mid-year check-in point that is required, as well as the end-of-the-year conferences with every teacher. Okay. So a whole new idea for us, for our practice rating, will be the parent feedback. The district will use parent feedback. This is, as I said, a new concept. The score is determined based on the amount of progress towards a goal. I want to be very clear that this is not about my students' parents or guardians rating me as an effective teacher in the classroom. The surveys, the information that we will gather will go through the school climate surveys. As you can see, there's some sample questions that we can embed into our school climate surveys. Adults at this school challenge my child to do better. Discipline is enforced fairly at this school. I feel well informed about what is going on at the school. I have opportunities for involvement in the school. Those are the kinds of questions. The state has provided us with about 150 bank questions that you can use to help elicit parent feedback regarding school engagement, school discipline, school culture. So we will be able to, at all of the schools, go through those sample questions, determine what is the area of focus that we want to have in our schools, and have our teachers work towards increasing those goals.
Have we done a climate survey in the last 5 or 10 years?
Yes. Oh, yes.
We do them as part of the...
Is it every year? Every other year?
It's required now under the recently approved board policy as it relates to bullying and the development of school climate plans. So we've actually conducted those surveys this school year. I believe we're required to do it every other year.
Right.
What method is used to do this?
It's emails and internet surveys, correct?
We used our Edline surveys, the survey feature tied to our website.
And who compiles the data?
I aggregated it. And, I stripped the names off of it and then sent it to the data team for the raw data.
I'm wondering, though, with the increase, if there's possibility that we would have to hire someone or outsource this type of work. I mean, it just seems like a huge increase of all of a sudden you're going to become like a marketing research person among all your other titles.
But I think that because we do it for the school climate already, we'll have a natural progression into it.
Okay.
And I don't think it's going to, that particular piece of it will be
Okay.
onerous. I think ensuring that we get a good sample size, I think that will also maybe depend on who the email comes from. Emails from certain people get opened a lot more than other people.
Will the results be reported to the board?
We are obligated actually under legislation to report back to the board this school year on an update on bullying policy. So as part of that, we're going to be obligated to provide more specific building-based school climate plans that the board will need to review as part of we're thinking about a May meeting where we need to report to the board, and part of that we will be able to include in that some feedback on the school climate surveys.
And this is, again, this is what we will be doing is we will just be taking 1 or 2 questions and embedding it into the work that's already being done to then pull the answers to those 1 or 2 questions to then help identify and write the parent goal, the parent feedback goal for the school.
So if each individual teacher isn't surveyed on their own personal performance, they're tied to the overall performance of the school.
It is not about the answer that is generated. It is about the individual's teachers. The individual's teachers work towards meeting and increasing that response. For instance, when I was a classroom teacher, I worked in a school that had very disengaged parents. Our school goal was to increase our parent engagement. One thing that we did to do that was we moved where our PTA meetings were held. We moved them to the community centers, to the apartment buildings, and as a way to try to increase that engagement. So I would have been monitored, I would have been rated based on the work that I did towards increasing parent engagement and involvement.
So you would send notes out.
Exactly.
To parents.
Exactly. So what is the work that I'm doing to help increase that goal? And so if I look at if I take it to the next slide, that's exactly it, that it's the work towards exceeding the goal. So if my personal goal had been that I was going to increase homeschool communication through monthly newsletters, the idea would be that to meet that goal, perhaps I'm sending, when I go to have my end of the year evaluation conference, I have with me 10 newsletters.
Okay.
If I have, I may be determined to have met my goal. Perhaps I will have exceeded my goal. And I say that with ambiguity to highlight the idea that at this point, the definition of exceeding a goal, meeting a goal, partially meeting a goal, and did not meet a goal is still somewhat ambiguous. That is work that we are currently doing in our staff appraisal group. It is work and conversations that we're having in our leadership teams to try to put around there some better language, some clarifying language so that we have greater consistency and a greater understanding between our teachers and administrators exactly what that means to exceed a goal. And I say that also to really highlight for you that this will be, as much as time and effort as we are putting into this plan, it will not be presented as the end-all, be-all. It will have to be a living and breathing and working document that will continue to evolve.
So for my own edification and clarification,
yes,
that 10% is still going to be an administrator evaluating the teacher on a teacher's performance in garnering parent feedback?
Could be. It's about the work that I have said. This is what I'm going to do to increase parent engagement. And did I do what I said I was going to do? So that's what that 10% is about.
So it's a little misleading to call it parent feedback. I mean, it's not us. It's
right. These are the state's
calling it that.
Yeah.
My initial was, parents get to sort of.
And that's what everybody's is. And
it's not that at all.
No, it's not. And that's one of the things I really want people to understand is that's not what it is about, because it is so off-putting to people, teachers, administrators, parents, students. It should be reworked.
Probably will be.
At some point, I'm sure.
Right after we get it done.
Right after we get it done.
Of course. I'll get a memo tomorrow. We'll see. Okay, so the outcome rating. This is the other half of the evaluation process. In our district, we use data constantly. We're constantly monitoring student progress and benchmarking our students. As a result of this new requirement, this will allow us to do what we're already doing, but just formalize it a little bit more. We'll be able to formalize it into our evaluation plan. All of our teachers, our K-2 teachers, our 3-5 teachers, we're constantly using literacy assessments to help us benchmark where our students are and help us to understand where we want them to be at the end of the school year. So the outcome rating is really about taking the data that we're currently using and helping to put it in a structure that we can then show growth and improvement towards. This is a rather, it seems really big, but it's not so big when you really kind of get into the meat of it. Every teacher will be required to have 2 student learning outcomes. One of them, if you are a standardized tested subject area teacher, you must do one standardized, and you can do one non-standardized. If you are a non-standardized tested teacher, you will have 2. And there's a planning cycle that goes into it. So you would begin the year, and you would get as much data about your students as you possibly could. You're going to look at that data and then set goals for those, for your students. You want the SLOs, those are the broad goals for student learning. We want to make sure that the goals that our teachers are setting are central to the work that they're doing. And this has been one of the biggest points of communication I've tried to get out to teachers, is to understand we as a district are not going to be asking you or expecting you to pick really random pieces of data or obscure things that you do in your daily instruction and start to try to quantify that work that you're doing. Do the things that you're already doing. Work on those concepts, continue to work on them, and let's just start gathering that data and put it all in one place for the purposes of your evaluation document. I had a conversation with an applied arts teacher who had indicated that they, as a department, had started talking about this already and what could they do. And they figured, because one of the other conversations that I have with the teachers a lot is that the goal is to really build and continue to have our collegial teams working together cross-content, cross-grade level, within different houses of schools, and building upon their commonality so that they can all have the same student learning outcome. So all of our 5th grade teachers at Cider Mill could have the same student learning outcome. They would each have different IAGDs, which are the indicators for academic growth and student development. But, and it rolls right off my tongue, sick or not, it's crazy. That's where the difference would be, because my kids are going to look different than Chris's kids would. But all of us are working towards increasing inference strategies, using inference strategies during reading. So we're all going to work on inferences, but the percentage of the kids and the students that we're going to be looking at for data purposes would be different because our classes are different. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You sure? Okay. Sometimes I just kind of go with it, and I've said it so many times that it makes really great sense to me, and it may not make sense to others. So I want to make sure you get a chance to ask questions if you need to. Oh, I'm sorry. So let me go back to the applied arts. I totally birdwalked here. Okay, so the applied arts conversation. They have talked as a team about what could they do at the high school level, and they've talked about that there's a common expectation of oral presentations. So they said, okay, how can we all work together? We know that all of us within our content areas are expecting students to perform oral presentations. Let's work together on some common assessments that we can develop and use as our data collection points, and we can use those to help monitor our kids throughout the year. So that's a great group of teachers right there who are able to already pull this work together, things they're already doing, embed it, and make it move forward. So I was really excited about that. Oh, gosh, I'm sorry. Okay, so again, each of the different components teachers will be rated on, and they receive scores for those individual components. And at the end, I'll provide kind of a summary about how this all work together. But again, there is, as you look at the language, there is some wiggle room in the language, and so that, again, is a conversation that we're having. The last 5% of 50% is the whole learning indicator. This will be one goal that all teachers and administrators within schools will share in common. For the majority of our schools, it will be their school performance index. Miller Driscoll will have an opportunity to determine as a school what is their overall school goal, so they can choose a reading, they could choose writing, they could choose a math, whatever they want to be, whatever they want to look at in terms of their student performance. Choose that, and then measure, and then rate themselves based on how they measure in that goal, how they come out. Yep, and do you need me to tell you again? Should we go back over what school performance index is, or you go?
You guys okay?
Okay, good. All right, great. Now, I'm more than happy to hear that. Believe me. No,
Reminding me of my sixth period class in history teacher.
What? Just the acronyms, right, the acronym.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We love the acronyms.
Oh, boy. Okay, so again, I'm sure you already know what I'm going to say. There's a lot of ambiguity in the language, so we'll work on that.
It's all going to change.
Exactly.
Not till after we get it set.
So here we go. Here is a total summative rating. You get a teacher practice score, you get a student outcome score, you find out where they cross, and that's your overall rating. Now, within each of, as I said, within the teacher practice, you get your observation score, you get your parent feedback score, you come up with a total set of points. And these practice points, the ranges, then help determine and quantify or qualify for you what your actual rating is. Now, when the state was using the Danielson framework, it had been determined that within even the observation, that there was weighting within the observation rating for the different domains. There were 4 domains. And so the classroom environment and instruction domains weighted heavier than your planning and your professional responsibility domains. So there was a lot of math calculations that needed to come together to be able to provide you with a solid 3 score. Because the state is now going to a new rubric and framework, I don't know if that will hold true or not. If it does, we will continue with it. If it doesn't, we will evolve with the state, and we will see. So when and if those changes are made, I will certainly come back and let you know.
And again, we're aligning with the state because we feel it's most financially advantageous and efficient to do so because of the training and support they provide us.
I do. Yeah, we do.
Within available funding.
Right, within available appropriation is actually the specific language in the, and we'll get to that. I have that for you coming up.
That was a classic look.
Within available appropriation. So, and the same holds true for student outcome indicators. However, there is not a weighting of those in terms of within the scores. There's a weighting within the weighting. This is more straightforward. Now, here we go. The Ed Reform Bill requires a definition of effective and ineffective teaching. But it is also critical, separate and apart from just the Ed Reform Bill's requirement, is that we have to now as a district define clearly what an effective and ineffective teacher is as a result of the new teacher termination and teacher tenure language changes that will go into effect July 1st, 2014. So it's not next fall, it's not next summer, it's the summer after that. For tenure, superintendents will now make tenure decisions based on, and I quote, effective practice as informed by the performance evaluations. For some districts, this may be a new way of doing business. For Wilton, it is not a new way of doing business. We always look at our teachers' practices in the classroom and determine if we think that we're meeting the standards that we have here in Wilton for effective instruction. What will change, however, is we will be able to point to specific language now to say, this is what effective instruction, based on the evaluation ratings, determines. The teacher termination language will also include, among other things, the teacher ineffectiveness is now a reason to move towards teacher termination for a tenured teacher. The current language only calls for districts to prove that a teacher is incompetent or inefficient. And those 2 standards are very difficult to achieve at the moment. So I'm not going to read to you. You guys can read. Thank you.
So this standard then would imply that one is rated substandard for 2 years in a row or 2 cycles, then that person could be terminated.
Correct.
And again, one of the things about, as I understand it from the meetings Jane and I have gone to, and other ones I've gone to by myself, but there's in the past, there's a very clear legislative language that talks about following the process.
Correct.
So that you can protest or grieve the decision if the administrator has not followed the process, can't grieve the judgment that is rendered, which is a different, is a new aspect of the law.
Questions about that at all? Okay, so support and development. The current plan had language already developed that we were able to just transfer over for teacher support and remediation plans, dispute resolution, and opportunities for career development. So those were three major components that we were able to just literally cut and paste into our new document, which was great. The Ed Reform Bill also requires that we have a professional development committee. Wilton has had one in place for many years, and in the next few months we're going to work, Tim and I have started having our conversations about how do we, and how will those two groups now, the Staff Appraisal Committee, which the districts are required to have for evaluation, development, and review, and the Professional Development Committee, how will those two committees work together? How do they dovetail together? Because with now all professional development that districts provide has to be rooted in teachers' identified needs through their evaluation plans. And so it really is about thinking about, does the Professional Development Committee really become a kind of a clearinghouse almost, and a warehouse of, we've got 12 teachers in this school who are all asking for this kind of professional development, and here are 3 great opportunities that they could do, and so we could get them hooked up with that and start to really help to filter through the needs and identify resources to help address those needs. Okay. The requirement, also another requirement, I should say, is that evaluators must demonstrate proficiency in conducting teacher evaluations in an ongoing process. So as part of this memo that we received last Friday, where they were changing their standards-based, the state indicated that there was going to be, to ensure that evaluators are trained, that the State Department plans to provide training to districts at little or no cost within available appropriations. They are going to go through a process where they will have an RFP. They will then have vendors to design and implement a system for training and assessing proficiency of evaluators. It will be designed to ensure that evaluators possess a deep understanding of effective teaching, they're skilled in gathering consistent, reliable, valid observational data and evidence, and artifacts about best practice, and that they can correctly interpret the evidence against the specific levels of performance. We had already scheduled for ourselves for this summer 3 days for our administrators to go through the calibration training for the Danielson model, because we won't be using the Danielson model anymore. We have those 3 days still on hold. We don't know if we will be using those days because we have yet to see exactly what the RFP will bring. But CES they don't know if they will be the vendor who is selected to provide this training or not. If they are, we already have our dates on the calendar with them. If they aren't, we'll figure out who is and we'll schedule it as such. But our intent is certainly to have all of our administrators calibrated and trained this summer prior to starting the school year.
And again, the importance of the calibration is that when you go in to observe a classroom, we have different lenses, and the idea that of this approach is that it's to try to bring about somewhat of more standardization than we've had it in the past. That would lead to more consistent evaluative practice.
So 2 administrators evaluating the same teacher would provide the same evaluation.
That's the
theory,
goal,
yes.
right? And I think that's been something that all of us have been working on, is how do we've spent years as our administrative team looking at what are we looking for to try to get before the state required this, is we were trying to develop some consistent areas that we were looking for as we went in to do observations in classrooms. So this is not new for us, it's just getting a higher degree of standardization.
So those 3 observations, the teacher is done by 3 different people?
No. Right now, the current we will continue to use central office staff to help support the building administrators in the evaluation process.
And again, as principals, and we work, Jane works with them all the time, and Tim and I always, if there's somebody who's in need of, long before the state came along with us, you might go in 6 times, 7 times, 10 times to work with teachers if we were trying to provide support for people who needed some help.
And so the last one is, what does this all mean for us? April 15th was the deadline by which districts had to submit their state evaluation plans as part of the memo that we received last Friday.
Right.
They said now there's an extension that you can apply for. So we will be applying for the extension. The extension deadline is May 3rd, 2013. The state has said even if you submit it by the extension deadline date that you will receive your feedback and are expected to submit your revisions to the state no later than May 17th. With the expectation that you will implement on July 1st, 2013. It is an ever-evolving process and plan, and we will evolve with it. So any questions? Other
further
Thank
questions?
you for keeping the sense of humor about it all and your sanity.
She wasn't so filled with
Will
humor.
we
It might
be-
Everything changed in a heartbeat.
I was really angry with the state.
Temperature.
Yes, I think so.
There's a fair amount of detail in that presentation. Is that, you've now given it publicly, is
Right.
that something we can put up on the website for folks to look at?
Not a problem. Sure.
That'd be great.
What I will, this is not the last you will see of me, because we also have an administrator's evaluation plan that we will also need to go through in detail. So there are
Can we
some...
compare and contrast when we do that as opposed
Sure,
to
we could do some Venn diagrams. I can get you guys up in small groups if you'd like. We can have some interactive approaches.
Talk amongst yourselves.
Coffee talk is fine with me. I'm from Jersey. It's fine. But no, we will do the administrators, but then we will also need to come back again before that May 3rd date for you to approve the ever-evolving documents at those time for submission.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I feel better.
We now move on to the financial statement with Mr. Post.
And if you thought finance, that was fun.
Right. Sorry to bring you down farther. This is the financial report through the end of February. I'm projecting a budget deficit of $924,132. The deficit is being driven by the same factors that I identified in my last financial report to the board back in November, that being special education outplacements and special education contracted services expenditures. Outplacements are over budget due to the unexpected increase in the number of outplaced students and the number of unbudgeted legal settlements. Most of these outplacements and settlements are the result of the increase in the number of students being identified with social and emotional disorders that we've been seeing since late last spring. Special education contracted services are over budget due to the unanticipated and unbudgeted services for students. The services include behavior therapies, vocational training, independent psychological and speech evaluations, and audiological services. All these services are either required by IDEA to be done independently or beyond the scope of our expertise. The projected special education deficit is $1,296,114. Our updated excess cost claim was filed on March 1st for $926,864. I'm estimating that our reimbursement rate will be around 65 to 70%. If that's the case, the town can expect to receive about $625,000. Since the anticipated excess cost reimbursement does not exceed our projected deficit, the partial spending freeze that was implemented last fall is still in place. In health benefits, our expenditures are over budget year-to-date by $54,226, which is about $100,000 less than I reported back in November. And this figure does include the $468,000 that the board has contributed to the teachers' health savings accounts. Ed Norgard continues to estimate that our claims for the year will end up very close to budget. I'll take any questions you have about the report.
Have you already shared that estimated $625,000 with the town?
I have.
Any other questions?
Is the cost savings having an impact? Can you estimate what, in terms of freeze on expenditures?
The freeze was to save us about $370,000. I am watching, it's a good question, I'm watching some other accounts too that I'm hopeful will end up, we're running under budget in things like workers' compensation and some other areas, unemployment, and a few other areas that I think are going to end up under budget also.
Is the $300,000 projected, or is that to date?
Well, when I froze the accounts, that's how much was left in there, so in theory that should be the savings. There have been a few emergency expenditures that bit into that a little bit, but it's pretty close.
Do you anticipate we may need to expand the spending freeze?
No, I don't think so.
Other questions? Thank you, Ken.
You're welcome.
We now move on to our, I believe, our last action item, which is a gift to the
Good
Special
one
Services-
for a change.
Gift to the Special Services Department by Ann Paul.
As Ann comes up, I might point out some wonderful members of our parent advisory group are here tonight. Dr. Repsinski and several members of the PAB.
Yep, they're back there. And I've asked Matt to join us because we're talking technology and I keep them at hand, close at hand. I'm very pleased to come to the board tonight to ask approval to accept a very generous gift to the Wilton Preschool. The Department of Special Services has received a donation of $54,000, $912.16 to the Wilton Preschool to be used for assistive technology. The donor has asked for anonymity, which we will certainly respect. This is intended to be used for early intervention for children with special needs, but we know that it certainly benefits all children in the preschool setting. We've worked with, Fred and I have worked with Matt, with Laura Giovanetti from CES, their assistive tech specialist, to put together a proposal to our donor, which is a presentation that we did make, and the resulting purchases, which I listed to the board, are the substance of the grant, of the donation that we're requesting that you approve.
I have a motion to graciously accept.
I'll move.
Second? All in favor? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What an unbelievable gift.
We're extremely appreciative and very humbled
And
by
I
the
think that
gift.
what a high form of generosity to do that anonymously, too. I think it says volumes about
I
the
do
donors
too.
and means a great deal to us.
We're very appreciative.
You've done the research for the type of technology, assistive technology, specifically for that age group and for those with particular types of issues.
Yes, and Matt has the expertise, background to be able to guide us in that, and he's done so in the presentation.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next board meeting is, well, actually, the next meeting that we have is March 27th with the Board of Finance. It's the public hearing on the budget. It's at 7:30 p.m. and that's at Middlebrook, isn't it?
That's correct.
That's at Middlebrook.
Public hearing, okay.
So it's a public hearing, and we welcome anybody and everybody that wants to come participate. After that, the 28th, the Board of Finance meets with the Board of Selectmen, and our capital budget is discussed. As folks know, it's pretty light for us this year. And our next regular meeting is April 11th. And I do want to remind everybody that the town meeting is May 7th at Middlebrook. With that, as we do at the beginning and end of every meeting, we look for public comments. Is there anybody that would like to speak? Seeing none, I'd like to remind everybody that we do read our emails. Please send those in. And I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye.